Okay, I was very rudely interrupted by my camera, as often happens. What I have here is a log chart of the rate of change, as I mentioned in the last video. The rates of change in various parts of China, falling from pushing 100% down to less than 0.1. This is a log chart: 100, 10, 1, 0.1, 0.01. So 0.01, you're only talking about a handful of cases every day. I mean, you're talking about like 30 new cases a day here in China, maybe 40, that kind of number. But here you were getting thousands of new cases a day. But as you see, the rate, as I've mentioned before, in terms of the daily rate of increase in percentage terms, has been decreasing almost on a straight line since the 27th of January right to the 9th of March. So I mean, that is quite a long time. That's 40 odd days of data basically. However, the rest of the world, which had a very low number of cases here, was pushing 10% or more increases per day, but it's now gone to a steady 20% increase per day. Now that's very ominous because it's not really falling. And what I was thinking was, okay, the rest of the world now has 20,000 cases, nearly 30,000 cases, okay, and the rate is still at about 20% per day. Whereas for China, that wasn't really true. Once China had 20,000 cases, it's probably here somewhere, okay, and the rate was down to about perhaps 10% per day. So I decided to make another chart, and the chart is this one. And this is really the kind of pandemic smoking gun chart, if anyone was. Now what you've got here is the daily rate of change plotted against the number of cases, the current number of cases. So you've got 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Yellow line is China. The purple line is the rest of the world. So when China had about 1,000 cases back in late January, you had a kind of a 60% day over day increase. So you went from 1,000 to 1,600 to whatever, to 2,500 to 4,000, etc., doubling in maybe 2 or 3 days. Well, doubling 2 days actually. But quite soon, by the time China got to 10,000 cases, you were down at about 25%. Here's 20, here's 30. Okay, 25% increase per day at 10,000 cases. By the time you got to about 20,000 cases, which is this line here, because this is a log scale, so you got 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000. Okay, you got down to a 10% rate of increase, just below 10% at 20,000. Just below 20%, sorry. Just below a 20% increase, sorry, at 20,000 cases. And then as you got to 30,000 cases, the rate fell to about 10% a day, which is this line here, okay? And then it fell and fell and fell and fell, and then you suddenly got that big spike of 16,000 new cases announced in over a day or two. The clinically diagnosed cases, but the trend then continued down, going down below 3%, 2%, 1%, and now, in fractions of a percent, as I mentioned on the previous graph, and converging really on about 80 to 90,000 cases. And this is the graph, another version of the graph that gives me my forecast that China might end up with as few as 81,000 or maybe 82,000 cases. If they because they're really closing it down now, if the figures are to be believed. Okay, well, let's have a look at the rest of the world in purple. China in yellow, the rest of the world in purple. When the world had fewer cases, as in probably quite a few places, but only a very small number of cases. Well, once the world got 1,000 cases, you had about a 10% rate of increase, going up to 20. And some of this will be due to the Diamond Princess here. Okay, so yeah, the world had a few thousand cases. The Diamond Princess has 600. So the Diamond Princess would have been dominating the world's cases here. But then you started to have South Korea come in, and Iran come in, and Italy come in. And your rate was going up to 30% a day almost. And it fell a bit to 20. And you got to 10,000 cases. 10,000 cases, the rate was just over 20% a day. But you see, the world has gone to 20,000 cases now, and the rate has actually gone up a bit. It's actually gone just over 20% a day. And it's overtaken where China was at 20,000 cases. You get to 20,000 cases here, the world, the rate, the daily percentage increase in the world has overtaken China. Okay, now it's just fallen off just a little bit. Okay, but if you look at the trend on this line, it's pretty flat actually. It may be falling slightly. The trend on the China line was already falling very, very sharply once they got to 20,000, 30,000 cases. Down to 10%, then down to 5%, down to 2.5%, down to 1%, down to way less than 1% here. Okay. But the direction of this line for the rest of the world, unless something very drastic is done, is going out here. Now, on a log chart, this is 1,000, this is 10,000, this is 100,000. Same distance out would be 1,000,000. That'd be out here somewhere. Okay, 10 million would be just off the screen. And if this trend is what's going to happen for the rest of the world, you're going to hit 1,000,000 cases. This is documented cases, not real cases. This is just documented cases. You could hit 10 million cases unless this starts to fall off sharply, which it is simply not doing right now. And I don't think we've got adequate testing in Iran. We haven't got adequate testing in the United States. They're only really just starting to test people. Okay, they've been testing people in the UK and Italy. They've been doing a lot, and South Korea has been working incredibly hard, and I think they may have it beat, and they may end up with about 10,000 cases. It's going to be insignificant compared to the rest of the world. I think Italy's going to end up with 50,000 cases maximum. They might overtake China at 80,000 quite easily. Today's data point, when that comes, the 50th data point for Italy on the WHO report number 50, is going to give an indication. I'm going to give a forecast later for Italy tonight, and for South Korea on my next video, because I've got these trends all set up. Okay, this is the rest of the world outside China. Maybe there's a possibility of getting some kind of a trend on that, but no, smoking gun pandemic. This is the smoking gun, that the rate isn't falling off, the daily rate isn't falling off, and we're already at 30,000 cases. Because you've got these various countries, and I haven't plotted Iran yet because I don't think I'd dare, but you've got Germany and France on an almost identical exponential trend, going up to 1,200 cases. You've got Italy. My Italy forecast stands at 50,000 cases. The Italy trend, the percentage trend, is falling a bit, but it's still over 20%. The South Korea trend is falling below 10%, and that gives me a forecast of 10,000 cases for South Korea. And there's the trend on a linear graph, which is a lot better than the trend for Italy, which is why actually the South Korean forecast, even though they have an equal number of cases to Italy at several thousand, comes to 10,000, whereas the Italy forecast is at 50,000, because this rate is much higher for Italy. The percentage daily increase is much higher for Italy. And here is my graph from the last video showing that impossibly by the 15th of March, if the world continues on this exponential trend, the rest of the world outside China continues on the exponential trend, it's going to catch up with the 80,000 cases in China by the 15th of March. And at the very latest by the 23rd of March, which is very ominous. I mean, that's truly pandemic. If you have more cases outside China than inside China, you have a pandemic, Mr. Tedros, you communist idiot. Just never listen to these people. He has no credibility. He is beholden to China completely. And unfortunately, one can see here, just from the general graph, the log graph, with the rest of the world here, China here, the rest of the world is rapidly catching up with China, and it's not going to be very long before these lines meet. Okay, it's only going to be another week or maybe just over a week before those lines meet. And again, you see Italy on a log chart, straight line, an almost exactly exponential trend with a slope of 0.21. That's doubling every 3.5 days. South Korea, not so. Had an exponential trend, but it's forming an S-curve. The daily new cases have peaked in South Korea, and it's several days now, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 days since the peak. You know, when you look at these things, you can see that the rest of the world is in a lot of trouble. And as I start to look at the UK and the USA, once they've started to get enough data, you're going to start to see these exponential trends taking place. South Korea, though, has done a fabulous job and they've got this under control. I think that when the slope of the line starts to fall off just a little bit, you're about halfway. Okay, so they're at 4,000 or 5,000 cases when the slope of the line starts to fall off, and that gives you about 10,000 cases, which was true for China. Okay, once the slope had already fallen off here at 2,500 cases, gives you about 3,400 deaths for China, and the same here for the cases in China. The slope was falling off a long time ago, actually, and you're going to get maybe about 81 to 82,000 cases based on this ever-falling trend of deaths and ever-falling percentage trend of new cases. So I'm going to leave it at that for today, because it really is kind of tiring. Just one last look. Daily change in cumulative COVID-19 cases and deaths worldwide. Because of the fall in the China rate, you had the world's cases were increasing at less than 1% a day, the deaths increasing down to about 2% a day. But because of the combination of the other countries and the contribution from the rest of the world now, both the deaths and the new cases, the world totals are now trending upwards very, very steadily for at least 10 days. And that is a very, very bad sign. That's a sign the rest of the world has taken over from China with this disease. And with that, I'm going to leave you, and I'll talk about South Korea and Italy a little bit later today when the 50th WHO report comes out with a new forecast for each of those. And I might do a couple of short sort of forecasts for Germany and France as well, which are in exponential trends up at the moment. Until then, goodbye, thanks for watching.